The Velthari had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their empire stretched across 1,000 star systems, and they had conquered more species than they could count. When their scout ships found Earth, they watched the small blue planet for only 3 days before making their decision. The humans were weak. They had soft skin that tore easily. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor on their bodies. Their bones broke under pressure. They needed to eat and drink every single day just to survive. The Velthari High Council looked at all this information and laughed. These creatures were perfect for labor. They would work in the mines until they died. And then, more would be taken to replace them. The invasion began on a quiet Tuesday morning. Jake Harmon was 52 years old. He had gray hair at his temples and scars on his hands from a war that most people had forgotten. He had served 3 tours as a Marine in places where the sand got into everything, and the nights were filled with sounds that still visited him in his dreams. Now he lived alone in a small cabin near a lake in Montana. He spent his days fishing and his nights reading books by the fire. He had thought his fighting days were over. He was wrong. The first sign was the shadow. Jake looked up from his fishing line and saw something massive blocking out the sun. It was a ship, bigger than anything he had ever seen, and it made no sound at all as it descended. For a moment, he just stared at it. His mind tried to make sense of what his eyes were seeing. Then the smaller ships came down from the big one, and Jake understood that the world had just changed forever. He ran toward town. He was not a young man anymore, but his body remembered how to move when danger was close. By the time he reached the main street, it was already too late. The creatures were everywhere. They stood 8 feet tall and looked like insects that had learned to walk upright. Their skin was hard and black, like armor made of shadow. They had 4 arms and eyes that reflected no light. They carried weapons that made no sound but dropped people to the ground like puppets with cut strings. Jake watched his neighbor, old Sam Cooper, try to fight back with a hunting rifle. The bullet bounced off the creature's chest like a pebble thrown at a tank. Sam was dead before he hit the ground. There was no fighting this. Not here. Not now. Jake let himself be taken. He did not resist when they put the cold metal collar around his neck. He did not scream when they pushed him into the line with the others. But his eyes never stopped moving. He watched everything. He learned. In the holding area, he found others like himself. Amy Cole was 38, with short brown hair and steady hands that had saved lives in field hospitals across 3 continents. She had been an Army Ranger medic, one of the first women to earn that title, and she had seen more death than most doctors see in a lifetime. When Jake met her eyes, he saw the same cold calculation he felt in his own heart. She was not afraid. She was planning. Pete Dawson sat against the wall with his legs stretched out in front of him. One of those legs was metal and plastic from the knee down. He had lost the real one to an explosive device in Afghanistan, and he had been told he would never walk again. He had walked out of the hospital 6 months later and returned to active duty. The Navy SEALs did not accept the word impossible. Neither did Pete. He was 45 now, retired, but his body was still hard with muscle, and his eyes missed nothing. Maria Vance was the oldest of them at 61. She had spent 20 years with Air Force intelligence, learning to find patterns in chaos and meaning in noise. She had listened to enemies speak in languages she did not know and had learned to understand them anyway. Now she sat quietly in the corner, her head tilted slightly, listening to the guards talk in their clicking, buzzing language. Her lips moved silently as she began to memorize sounds. The Velthari did not separate them. They did not ask questions or look at records. They simply pushed all the humans together like cattle and loaded them onto transport ships. To the aliens, one human was the same as another. Weak, soft, harmless. The ship was cold and dark. Hundreds of people were packed into each holding cell, pressed together so tightly that sitting down was almost impossible. Children cried. Old people prayed. Young men shouted and beat their fists against the walls until their hands bled. Jake did none of these things. He stood still and breathed slowly. He had been in bad situations before. He had been captured once, held for 11 days in a concrete room with no windows. He had survived. He had escaped. He had made the people who took him regret their choice. He would do it again. On the second night, he made his way through the crowd to where Amy stood. They did not speak at first. They did not need to. Veterans could recognize each other, without words. There was something in the way they stood, the way they watched, the way they stayed calm when everyone else was falling apart. "How many?" Jake asked quietly. "I have counted 14 so far," Amy replied. "Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. Some are old. Some are young. All of them are waiting." "Waiting for what?" Amy looked at him, and a small smile crossed her face. "Waiting for someone to tell them it is time." Jake nodded slowly. He looked around the cell at the crying families and the terrified children. He looked at the guards who walked past without even glancing at their prisoners. He looked at the walls that hummed with alien technology. The Velthari thought they had captured livestock. They thought they had taken workers for their mines. They had no idea what they had actually done. They had taken wolves and put them in a cage with sheep's clothing. They had gathered together the most dangerous creatures their galaxy had ever seen and given them a common enemy. They had made the worst mistake any conqueror could make. They had given warriors a reason to fight. Jake closed his eyes and let his body rest. There would be time for planning later. There would be time for counting guards and mapping corridors and finding weaknesses. For now, he needed to save his strength. The Velthari would learn their mistakes soon enough, and when they did, Jake would be ready to teach them exactly what humans were capable of when they had nothing left to lose. The journey through space took 19 days. Jake counted each one by the cycles of the lights in the ceiling. The Velthari kept the cells dim for 8 hours, then bright for 16. It was not kindness. It was efficiency. They had learned that most species lasted longer when given time to sleep. During those 19 days, Jake built an army. It started with small conversations. A whispered word here, a hand signal there. He found Danny Webb on the third day, a former Green Beret who had spent 15 years training soldiers in places that did not officially exist. Danny was 49, lean and quiet, with the kind of face that people forgot as soon as they looked away. It was the perfect face for a man who had made a career out of being invisible. Kate Sullivan found them on the 5th day. She was 53. With silver hair she kept tied back, and eyes that could cut through steel. She had commanded a Navy destroyer in the Pacific, and had once guided her ship through a typhoon that killed 1,000 people on the islands nearby. Her crew had survived without a single loss. She knew how to lead people through impossible situations. Chris Martinez came on the 7th day. He was younger than the others, only 36. But his eyes were old. He had worked for the CIA in countries where being caught meant death in ways that took a very long time. He had been caught twice. Both times, he had escaped. Both times, his captors had died. He did not talk about how. Together, they began to watch. The Velthari guards followed patterns. They always did. Every military force in history followed patterns, because patterns were efficient. The trick was learning to see them. Amy noticed that the guards changed shifts every 8 hours, and there was a gap of exactly 43 seconds when the corridor was empty during each change. Pete discovered that the energy barrier on their cell flickered slightly when the ship changed course, suggesting the power systems were connected. Maria spent every waking hour listening to the guards speak, building a vocabulary word by word. The aliens never noticed. Why would they? The humans stood quietly in their cells. They did not fight. They did not scream. They did not even try to escape. The Velthari had seen this behavior before in countless other species. They called it acceptance. They thought the humans had given up. They could not have been more wrong. On the 10th day, Jake called the first real meeting. It happened in the darkest corner of the cell, hidden by the bodies of 100 people who had learned to sleep standing up. 14 veterans gathered in a tight circle, their voices so low that even the people next to them could not hear. "Tell me what you know," Jake said. Pete spoke first. "The guards carry 2 weapons each. The small one on their belt makes people fall asleep. The big one on their back burns holes through walls. I watched them test it on a man who tried to run. Amy went next. Their armor is weakest at the joints, the elbows and knees, also the neck, where the head connects to the body. The shell is thinner there. A sharp blade could pierce it if you hit the right angle. Danny added his piece. I counted 37 guards on this deck. They work in pairs, and each pair covers the same route every shift. They do not change partners. They do not change routes. They think routine is safety. Maria's voice was barely a breath. I understand perhaps 200 words now. They call us soft ones and dirt walkers. They think we are stupid because we do not speak in clicking sounds. They talk about us in front of us, saying things they would never say if they thought we could understand. What kind of things? Jake asked. They are afraid of the mining colony. They call it a punishment posting. Many guards have asked to be transferred, but their requests were denied. They are unhappy. They are careless. Maria paused. Also, they have never lost a prisoner. Not once in 300 years. They do not know what to do when things go wrong because things have never gone wrong. Kate spoke last. The ship has a command center on the upper deck. I saw it when they moved us from the landing zone. One door. 2 guards. If we could reach it, we could control the ship. Jake let the information settle in his mind. He had planned operations with less. He had won battles with worse odds. But this was not a battle. Not yet. This was preparation. We wait, he said. We learn more. We find more of us. And when we reach the colony, we find our moment. The others nodded. They understood patience. They had all spent years waiting for the right moment to strike. A sniper could lie still for days, waiting for a single shot. A spy could spend months building a cover before making a move. Patience was not weakness. Patience was a weapon. The days continued to pass. The network grew. Jake found a former police officer from Texas who had survived 3 gunfights. He found a retired firefighter from New York who had carried people out of burning buildings until his lungs gave out. He found a grandmother from Ohio who had served as a nurse in Vietnam and still remembered how to set bones and stitch wounds with nothing but a needle and thread. Not all of them were soldiers, but all of them were survivors. And in Jake's experience, survivors were the most dangerous people of all. They had already beaten death once. They were not afraid to face it again. On the 19th day, the ship slowed. The lights changed color, shifting from white to red. The guards moved faster, their clicking voices sharp with commands. Through the small window in the cell door, Jake caught a glimpse of a planet below. It was gray and brown, covered in clouds that looked like bruises. It was ugly. It was brutal. It was their new home. The doors opened, and the guards began to herd the humans out. They used shock sticks to keep everyone moving, striking anyone who walked too slowly. Jake took a blow to his shoulder without making a sound. He kept his eyes forward, and his mind clear. He had learned everything he needed to learn on the ship. Now it was time to learn the colony. The routines of the guards. The layout of the buildings. The weaknesses in the system. And when he had learned enough, when the moment was right, he would show the Velthari exactly what happened when you put a predator in a cage. The humans stepped off the ship and onto the rocky ground of mining colony Theta 9. The air was thin and tasted like metal. The sky was the color of old blood. Guards lined the path, watching the new workers with bored eyes. Jake looked around at the gray buildings and the dark mine entrances and the broken people shuffling through the dust. He saw fear in most faces. He saw despair, but in the faces of his people, the veterans who had learned to see the world as a battlefield, he saw something else entirely. He saw hunger. And it was not for food. The mines were killing grounds. Jake understood that within his first hour on the planet. The air was poison. The rocks were sharp. The quotas were impossible. Humans dropped dead every day from exhaustion, from accidents, from simply giving up. The Velthari did not care. There were always more soft ones to take from Earth. But Jake had not survived 3 wars by dying when things got hard. He organized his barracks within the first week. The veterans spread out among the workers, each one taking responsibility for a group of 10. They taught the others how to conserve energy, how to breathe in the thin air, how to lift rocks in ways that did not break their backs. Simple things, obvious things, but things that meant the difference between living and dying. Amy set up a hidden medical station in the corner of the barracks. She had no supplies at first. Nothing but her hands and her knowledge. Then she started trading. A portion of food ration for a piece of cloth, a favor for a sharp stone. Within a month, she had bandages, splints, and a collection of herbs that one of the prisoners had found growing in the cracks between buildings. The herbs did not do much, but sometimes doing a little was enough. Pete became a legend in the mines. The Velthari had looked at his metal leg and marked him as damaged goods. They assigned him to the hardest work, expecting him to die quickly. Instead, he outworked everyone. He carried loads that made younger men collapse. He climbed rock faces that other workers refused to touch. The guards began to watch him with confusion, their antennae twitching with something that might have been concern. Maria worked in silence, always listening. She had moved beyond simple words now. She understood sentences, conversations. She learned that the colony had been running for 80 years and had never had a rebellion. She learned that the guards considered this posting a joke, a place where nothing ever happened. She learned that the security systems were old and poorly maintained because no one believed they would ever be needed. She shared everything with Jake, and Jake shared it with the network. The network grew every week. Not just veterans now. Factory workers who had operated heavy machinery. Farmers who had spent their lives solving problems with whatever was at hand. Teachers who knew how to organize information and spread it quietly. Mothers who had protected their children from dangers that would have broken lesser people. Jake welcomed them all. He needed fighters, yes, but he also needed thinkers and planners and people who refused to accept that this was how their story ended. 40 days passed. Then 50. The veterans counted guards and mapped tunnels and tested barriers. They hid small pieces of metal in their clothes. They practiced fighting in the darkness of the barracks, moving slowly and silently so the sensors would not detect them. They were building something, piece by piece, like a bomb being assembled one wire at a time. Then came the day that changed everything. Her name was Claire, and she was 20 years old. She had been a college student in Oregon, studying to become a veterinarian. She loved animals and plants, and the smell of rain in the forest. She had never hurt anyone in her life. When the Velthari took her, she had been walking home from class with a book bag over her shoulder and a song in her heart. Now she was dying. The work had broken her. 60 days of poison air and brutal labor had worn her down to bone and exhaustion. She collapsed in the mine tunnel, her legs simply refusing to carry her another step. She fell face first into the dust and did not move. An overseer came. His name was something that sounded like grinding metal, but the humans called him the Tall One because he stood a head above the other guards. He was known for his cruelty. He enjoyed using his shock stick more than the others did. He walked toward Claire's fallen body and raised his weapon, ready to punish her for the crime of being too weak to work. Jake was 30 feet away. He was carrying a load of rocks toward the processing area. He saw the Tall One raise his stick. He saw Claire's body, small and still on the ground. He saw the other humans looking away because they had learned that watching only made things worse, and something inside him broke. He dropped his rocks. He walked forward. He did not run. He did not shout. He simply moved with the calm purpose of a man who had made a decision and would not turn back from it. The Tall One saw him coming and paused. His compound eyes focused on this strange soft one who was moving toward him instead of away. His antennae twitched with surprise. Jake stepped between the overseer and Claire. He stood straight. He met the alien's eyes without fear. "No," he said, just one word, quiet and firm. The Tall One did not understand the word, but he understood the meaning. This soft one was defying him. This was wrong. This was not how the universe worked. The Velthari gave orders, and the lesser species obeyed. That was the natural way of things. The shock stick came down on Jake's shoulder. The pain was white and hot and endless. But Jake did not fall. He did not cry out. He had felt worse. He had survived worse. He stood there and took the blow, and kept his eyes locked on the alien's face. The tall one hit him again. And again. Other guards came running, drawn by the commotion. They saw one of their own beating a soft one. And they saw the soft one refusing to fall. The humans in the tunnel stopped working. They watched. For the first time in 60 days, they watched. Finally, the tall one stopped. His arms were tired. His weapon was dripping with blood from Jake's torn skin. But the human was still standing, still staring, still refusing to break. Something passed between them in that moment. Jake saw it in the subtle shift of the alien's body. It was fear. Small and new and quickly hidden. But real. The tall one had never seen anything like this. He did not know what to do with something that would not submit. He walked away. He left Claire on the ground and Jake standing over her. And he walked away. That night, every human in the colony knew what had happened. The story spread through whispers and hand signals, and looks that needed no translation. One of them had stood up. One of them had refused to break. One of them had shown the masters that humans were not what they seemed. Jake called a meeting. The largest one yet. Veterans and workers and ordinary people crowded into the darkest corner of the barracks. Their faces lit with something new. Hope. Anger. Hunger for justice. It is time, Jake said. We have learned enough. We have waited long enough. Now we take back our lives. No one disagreed. They had been waiting for this moment since the day they were taken. They were ready. The Velthari had no idea what was coming. The attack began at the 43rd second of the guard shift change. That was the window Amy had identified months ago. The tiny gap when the corridors were empty and the new guards had not yet taken their positions. 43 seconds was not much time, but it was enough. Danny led the first team. 12 people, all veterans, all armed with sharpened metal tools they had hidden in the walls of the barracks. They moved through the corridor like shadows, making no sound at all. The first guard never saw them coming. Danny hit the weak point at the base of the skull, just where Maria had said the armor was thinnest, and the alien dropped without a sound. 3 more guards fell in the next 30 seconds. The humans took their weapons and kept moving. Jake led the second team toward the communication center. Maria had learned that this was the heart of the colony's connection to the Dominion. If they could take it, they could stop the guards from calling for help. If they could hold it, they could control every door and alarm in the complex. The corridor was long and straight, lit by pale yellow lights that hummed with old power. 2 guards stood at the end, watching the approach with bored eyes. They saw the group of humans walking toward them and felt no concern. Soft ones were always moving somewhere. That was their purpose. Jake kept walking. His face showed nothing. His hands hung loose at his sides, hiding the blade tucked against his wrist. The guards did not raise their weapons. Why would they? These were just workers, harmless, weak, broken. When Jake was 10 feet away, he moved. The Velthari were fast. Their 4 arms could strike from multiple angles at once, and their reflexes were honed by 10,000 years of conquest. But humans had something the Velthari had never faced before. They had spent their entire history fighting things bigger and stronger than themselves. They had developed techniques for closing distances and exploiting weaknesses and turning enemy advantages into traps. Jake had learned these techniques in dusty training camps and bloody battlefields, and he had practiced them until they were as natural as breathing. He was inside the first guard's reach before the alien could aim its weapon. His blade found the joint at the elbow, cutting through the thin armor there. The guard screamed, a high clicking sound that hurt Jake's ears. But the sound died quickly as Pete came from the side and drove his own blade into the creature's throat. The second guard managed to fire once. The shot burned a hole in the wall behind Kate's head. She did not flinch. She had commanded men in combat. While missiles flew past her ship, a single energy bolt was nothing. She moved forward with the others, and the guard went down under a wave of human fury. The communication center door opened with a code Maria had stolen from overheard conversations. Inside, 3 technicians looked up with shock in their compound eyes. They were not soldiers. They had never needed to be. The colony had never faced a threat that required combat skills. They learned their mistake in the last seconds of their lives. "Seal the room," Jake ordered. Kate moved to the control panels, her naval experience translating easily to alien systems. The logic was the same. Power flowed. Doors opened and closed. Alarms triggered or stayed silent. Within minutes, she had the colony's security under human control. Across the complex, doors opened and closed in patterns that made no sense to the Velthari. Guards found themselves trapped in corridors with no way out. Weapons lockers unsealed for the first time in decades. The armory, which had been sealed since the colony's founding, opened its doors to a team led by Chris Martinez. The weapons were heavy and strange, but humans had been learning to use unfamiliar tools since they first picked up rocks. Chris figured out the firing mechanism in under a minute. His team figured it out by watching him. They emerged from the armory, armed with enough firepower to fight a small war. And that was exactly what they intended to do. The Velthari response was chaos. Their communication was down. Their security systems had turned against them. Guards ran through corridors trying to find the source of the problem, and human teams picked them off one by one. The aliens tried to form defensive positions, but they had never trained for this. They had never needed to. Their empire conquered through overwhelming force and superior technology. They had never learned what to do when the enemy refused to play by the rules. The humans played by rules the Velthari could not understand. They attacked from shadows and retreated before the enemy could respond. They used the colony's own layout against its masters, striking from tunnels and maintenance shafts that the guards had forgotten existed. They turned every corner into an ambush and every corridor into a kill zone. Jake moved through the battle like a ghost. He had done this before, in cities made of sand and mountains made of ice. He knew how to read a fight, how to see the patterns in the chaos. He directed teams with hand signals, reinforced weak points, exploited enemy mistakes. He was everywhere and nowhere, and the Velthari began to whisper that the soft ones had a demon among them. Amy followed the fighters, treating wounds as fast as they happened. She worked with alien medical supplies now. Equipment she had stolen from the colony's clinic in the first minutes of the attack. She saved lives that would have been lost. She kept fighters in the battle who should have been dead. Pete led the assault on the guard barracks. The Velthari there had managed to organize a defense, using furniture and equipment as barriers. They thought they were safe behind their walls. They did not understand that Pete Dawson had spent his life breaking through things that looked impossible to break. He led his team forward through a storm of energy fire, taking wounds that would have killed a normal man, and kept coming. When he reached the barricade, he tore it apart with his bare hands. By dawn, the fighting was over. The last Velthari surrendered in the command center of the main building. There were only 14 of them left, out of a force of over 200. They knelt on the floor with their forearms raised, clicking words that Maria translated as "pleas for mercy." Jake stood over them, covered in blood and dust and sweat. His body ached from a dozen wounds. His eyes burned from the poison air. But he was alive. His people were alive. And the colony was theirs. He looked at the kneeling aliens and felt something complicated in his chest. These creatures had stolen humans from their homes. They had worked them to death in their minds. They had treated them like animals. But Jake had never been good at cruelty, even to those who deserved it. "Lock them up," he said. "We might need them to talk later." The veterans obeyed. The prisoners were taken away. And Jake walked out into the morning light of a world that belonged to humans now. The first battle was over. But the war had just begun. The Velthari warship sat in the docking bay like a sleeping giant. It was called something that translated roughly to "crushing hand of justice." But the humans who captured it gave it a new name within hours. They called it the Reclaimer. Jake stood on the bridge and looked at the controls he did not understand. Stars filled the view screen, cold and distant and full of promise. Somewhere out there, more humans were suffering in more colonies, waiting for rescue that they did not believe would ever come. "Can you fly this thing?" he asked. Kate Sullivan smiled from the pilot's seat. She had spent 3 days learning the ship's systems with help from Maria's translations and the terrified cooperation of a captured Velthari engineer. The alien had been very helpful after Chris Martinez had a quiet conversation with him about the difference between willing helpers and unwilling ones. "I can fly anything," Kate said. "Just point me at where we need to go." Maria had spent those same 3 days buried in the colony's communication records. She had found what she was looking for: a complete list of every human labor colony in the Velthari Dominion. There were 47 of them. 47 worlds where people from Earth were working and dying and praying for salvation. "The nearest one is 6 days away," Maria said. "Colony Theta 1-2. Records show they have over 4,000 humans there." Jake nodded slowly. 4,000 people. 4,000 souls who had been stolen from their homes and told they would never see Earth again. 4,000 reasons to keep fighting. "Set course," he said. The reclaimer lifted off from the planet's surface and climbed toward the stars. Behind it, the colony that had been built for slavery was now a fortress of freedom. Danny Webb had stayed behind with 200 fighters to hold it, to organize the freed prisoners, to turn a prison into a base of operations. He had supplies for 6 months, and enough weapons to make any Velthari attack very expensive. As the ship cleared the atmosphere, Maria turned to Jake with a question in her eyes. "We should send a message," she said. "Let them know we are coming. Let the humans know that hope is real." Jake considered this. Part of him wanted to stay silent, to strike without warning the way they had struck at the colony. But another part of him understood something deeper. This was not just a military operation. This was something bigger. This was the beginning of a story that would be told for generations. "Do it," he said. "Send it on every frequency, in their language and ours." Maria sat at the communication station and began to type. She worked for nearly an hour, choosing each word carefully, building a message that would shake the foundations of an empire. When she was done, she looked at Jake for final approval. He read it slowly. Then he nodded. The transmission went out into the darkness of space, carried by waves that moved at the speed of light. It reached Velthari ships and human colonies and listening posts across 100 star systems. It was heard by aliens who had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, and by humans who had given up hope of ever being free. The message said this: "To the Velthari Dominion, you made a mistake when you took us. You looked at our soft skin and our small bodies and our short lives, and you decided we were weak. You were wrong. We are the children of a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived ice that covered half our planet. We survived plagues that killed half our people. We survived wars against each other that should have ended our species forever. We did not just survive these things. We became stronger because of them. You thought we were harmless because we came to you without claws or armor. You did not understand that we left those things behind long ago. We did not need them. We had something better. We had each other. We had the ability to learn and adapt and refuse to accept defeat. We had the will to keep fighting when any sane creature would have given up. You took us from our homes. You put us in chains. You worked us until we died. And still, we did not break. We watched. We learned. We waited. And when the moment came, we struck. Colony Theta 9 is ours now. Your guards are dead or captured. Your weapons belong to us. Your ship carries us toward the next colony, and the next, and the next. After that, we are coming for our people, every man and woman and child you stole from Earth. We will find them. We will free them. And anyone who stands in our way will learn what the soft ones can do when they have nothing left to lose. You should have left us alone. You should have looked at our planet and seen the predator hiding behind the peaceful face. You should have recognized the species that hunted mammoths to extinction and tamed wolves and split the atom and walked on its own moon. But you did not see. And now you will pay for your blindness. This is Jake Harmon, speaking for the free humans of the Reclaimer. To any of our people who can hear this message, hold on. Do not give up. Do not let them break you. We are coming. The veterans are coming. And we will not stop until every human in this galaxy is free. The message ended. Silence filled the bridge of the reclaimer. Jake looked at his crew, at the veterans who had fought beside him, at the ordinary people who had become extraordinary through suffering and determination. "What do you think they will do?" Amy asked quietly. "They will be afraid," Jake said. "Maybe for the first time in 10,000 years. And afraid people make mistakes." Pete Dawson laughed from his seat at the weapons console. His prosthetic leg gleamed in the light of the stars outside. "Good," he said. "I hope they make a lot of mistakes." The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel, carrying its human crew toward the next battle. Behind them, across the vast darkness of space, the Velthari Dominion scrambled to understand what had happened. Their perfect record of conquest was broken. Their image of invincibility was shattered. A species they had dismissed as livestock had risen up and shown them terror. And in colony after colony, humans who had lost all hope lifted their heads. They had heard the message. They knew rescue was coming. They began to watch their guards with new eyes, looking for weaknesses, counting rotations, learning patterns. The veterans were coming. And the Velthari would learn, through blood and fire and pain, that some species were never meant to be conquered. The war for human freedom had begun, and it would not end until the stars themselves remembered the name of Earth.